Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. The internet went out on my previous recording on the last slide, so this is the angle you're gonna get. So I'm not gonna waste any more time. Let's get started. Come on, share screen, let's go. All right. Education and popular culture. So I may zoom through this, no pun intended, because school is about to start. All right, that was your warm up. We're going to assess the various forms of media that helped shape American culture in the 1920s and discuss how new styles of writers, artists, and composers experimented within the decade. So, high school, fun times. During the 1920s, developments in education and mass media had a powerful impact that helped shape the nation. 1914, approximately 1 million American students attended high school. By 1926, that number had risen to nearly 4 million, an increase sparked by prosperous times in higher educational standards for industry jobs. Prior to the 1920s, high schools had catered to only college bound students. In contrast, now high schools of the 20s began offering a broad range of courses such as vocational training for those interested in industrial jobs. The public schools met another challenge in the 20s, teaching the children of new immigrants. Remember, new immigrants came from Southern and Eastern Europe. And during the years before World War I, the largest stream of immigrants in the nation had started coming, close to a million every year. Unlike the earlier English and Irish immigrants, many of these new immigrant families spoke any English. By the 1920s, their children will fill the city classrooms, and determined teachers met the challenge and developed a large pool of literate Americans. Taxes also help finance schools, and that's going to increase as well. School costs doubled between 1913 and 1920, and then doubled again by 1926. And the total cost of American education in the mid 1920s amounted to $2.7 billion a year. And we know that's a lot of money. So here's a classroom of kids probably listening to the morning announcements. Here you have more classroom. All right, newspapers, magazines. So widespread education increased literacy in America, but it was the growing mass media that helped shape the mass culture. Newspaper circulation rose, imitating the sensational stories of tabloids. Newspaper writers and editors learned how to hook readers. By 1914, only about 600 local newspapers were shut down. 230 had been swallowed up by huge national chains, giving readers more expansive coverage from the big cities. Mass circulation of magazines also flourished during the 1920s. Many of these magazines summarize the week's news, both foreign and domestic. And test question: by the end of the 20s, 10 American magazines, including Reader's Digest and Time, boasted a circulation of over 2 million each. So that's like 20 million readers of magazines during this time period. There's a newspaper, Al Capone newspaper, Time magazine, Al Capone, Life. There's some golf. You know, you gotta show out the golf in this. All right, radio test question again. Although major magazines and newspapers reached big audiences, it was the radio was being the most powerful communications medium to emerge during the 20s. Americans added terms to their vocabulary, such as airwaves, radio audience, tune in. By the end of the decade, radio networks had created something new in the US, the shared national experience of hearing the news as it happened. The wider world had opened up to Americans who could now hear the voice of their president or listen to the World Series live. And here they are. Here's a couple flappers listening to the radio. Here's a newspaper of Cleveland winning the World Series. All right, real American hero. So we've already talked about Charles Lindbergh, but we get to talk about it again. During the 1920s, many people had the money and free time to enjoy it. Americans spent nearly $4.5 billion on entertainment, most of that on the ever changing fads of the day. And early in the decade, Americans engaged in new leisure pastimes such as working a crossword or playing mahjong. a Chinese game with playing pieces that resembled dominoes, but it's not like dominoes. They also flooded athletic stadiums to see sports stars like Baby Ruth, who were glorified as superheroes by the mass media. America's most beloved hero at the time wasn't an athlete, but a small town pilot named Charles Lindbergh. He made the first nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. A handsome, modest Minnesotan, Lindbergh decided to go after a $25,000 prize offered to the first nonstop solo transatlantic flight. On May 1927, he took off near New York City in his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, flew up the coast to Newfoundland, and headed over across the Atlantic. After 33 hours, he set down at Le Bourget airfield outside of Paris. And in your book, it describes like the last 1,000 miles of the trip, so roughly a third of the trip. He was flying close to 100, 200 feet in the air because the weather was so bad. So Paris threw him a huge party, and on his return to the U.S., New York City showered Lindbergh with a ticker tape parade. The president received him at the White House, and America made him his idol. In an age of sensationalism, excess, and crime, Lindbergh stood for honesty and bravery the nation seemed to have lost. Lindbergh's accomplishment paved the way for others like Amelia Earhart. And there you go. Walk it like I talk it. So during the 1920s, the thirst for fun and entertainment seemed unquenchable during the decades. Youth culture set the tone. Energetic dances like the Charleston were all the rage. Young men who wanted to attract the glamorous flappers wore extremely baggy trousers, pants, and slicked back their hair. The leisure culture that developed in the 20s stimulated the arts, including its newest form, motion pictures. Movies became a national pastime, offering viewers a means of escape through romance and comedy. During the early years of the decade, all Hollywood movies were silent. Written dialogue and live music helped move the plot and enhance the mood. And by 1927, Test Question, the first major movie with sound, was released, The Jazz Singer. Walt Disney's Steamboat Willie was the first animated movie with sound, and that was released in 1928. And by 1930, talkies, nicknames for movies, talkies, had doubled movie attendance with millions of Americans going to the movies each week. Other countries started to develop their own film industry, which helped bring popular culture to eager customers. But this is America. This is America. Not everyone was approving of this new medium. And at first, all these movies, when they're hitting the screens, Americans had those traditional conservative family values, declaring some of these films immoral for their depictions of religious and sexual topics. So here are those pants. Here's Charlie Chaplin, one of the more famous actors of the day. There's the Jazz Singer and Mickey Mouse. So both playwrights and composers of music broke away from the European tradition of the 1920s. Eugene O'Neill's plays, such as The Harry Eight, forced Americans to reflect upon modern isolation, confusion, and family conflict. George Gershwin earned fame when he merged popular concert music with American jazz, thus creating a new sound that was identifiably American. Rhapsody in Blue and American in Paris. Irving Berlin wrote 1,500 songs, some of which appeared in Broadway shows and Hollywood movies. He is best remembered for his song White Christmas. Painters also appealed to Americans by recording an America of Dreams, and contrasting realities. Edward Hopper caught the loneliness of American life in his canvases of empty streets and solitary people. Georgia O'Keeffe produced intensely colored canvases that captured the grandeur of New Mexico. These two artists were a few of many whose work represented modernism, an artistic movement that rejected traditional art as outdated and no longer meaningful in the new industrialized urban world. And that's a painting. All right, Lost. So the 1920s also brought out an outpour of fresh and insightful writing, making it one of the richest eras in the country's literary history. In contrast to the merriment of popular entertainment, many works of the decade's writers revealed the tensions gnawing beneath the surface. Test Question. Sinclair Lewis was the first American to win a Nobel Prize in literature, and he was among the era's most outspoken critics. In his novel Babbitt, he will use his main character to ridicule Americans of the period. F. Scott Fitzgerald coined the term jazz age to describe the 1920s in his two books, This Side of Paradise and The Great Gatsby. He revealed the negative side of the period's gaiety or fun times, amusement. And Freedom, portraying the wealthy and attractive people leading imperiled lives of gilded surroundings. Remember anything in the Gilded Age? It means covered in gold. So you could splash something that's not that great and covered in gold, and it might seem that great on the outside, but in reality, it's not. Several writers also saw action in World War I, and their early books denounced war. John Dos Passos' novel Three Soldiers attacked war as a machine designed to crush human freedom. Later, he turned to social and political themes, using modern techniques to capture the mood of the city life and losses that came with the success. Ernest Hemingway, who was wounded in World War I, became one of the most popular authors of the time, and his novels The Sun Also Rises and Farewell to Arms. Hemingway criticized the glorification of war. Some of these writers, such as Fitzgerald, Hemingway, and Dos Passos, were soured by American culture, so they chose to settle in Europe, mainly in Paris. Socializing in the city's cafes, these expatriates formed a group of the writer Gertrude Stein called the Lost Generation. Test question. They hadn't been vanished or misplaced, but they were aimless and disoriented. PTSD, maybe. During this rich literary era, vital developments were also taking place in African American society as Black Americans started to voice their pride and heritage. And Black artists and writers revealed the richness of African American culture. And I know for a fact, I zoomed through that lecture, but needs must. Let's see. Your homework is page 399, 3 through 5. 399, 3 through 5. So yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. I know that was really fast. I spoke really fast. I'm at a new angle. You're seeing my double chin. So yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.